Hello, everyone. This is Jordan Braza from the Apps for Education team in Mountain View. Thanks for tuning in to our Fireside Chat today on Google Apps APIs for management and maintenance of your domains. I'm joined here by three of our Apps for EDU schools, Alaska, North Carolina State University, and Washtenaw Community College. Today we'll have these wonderful folks share how their schools are taking advantage of some of our APIs in their environments. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. I am recording this webinar, so if your colleagues were not able to tune in, we'll have a recording up on YouTube in the next day or so. If you have any questions or comments or any other things that you want to share, feel free to submit them in the Q&A window. If you do submit things in the chat window, we may not be able to see them, so please try to remember to use the Q&A window. So with that, let me just walk over our agenda for today. So we'll start off with Rex Rue from Washtenaw Community College, and he'll be talking about how they use a tool called Google Apps Manager, GAM, and the provisioning API. So we'll hand it over to Nick Young from NC State, and he'll be talking about how they use the groups and reporting APIs. And wrap up with Bill Wakefield from University of Alaska, where they'll talk about how they use the Audit API and some other APIs. At the end, we'll have Q&A and general discussion. With that, I will hand it over to Rex now. Rex, you should have presenter privileges any second now.
Thanks, Jordan. Do you get slides? Full screen?
No, you want to start the presentation.
All right. Google Chrome has crashed.
Oh.
It's still shared? Hello, I'm Rex from Washtenaw Community College. I'm a Unix systems engineer. That should be very apparent from the design of my slides. So here's 15 minutes of talk, and I'm going to start with introducing WCC and how we use Google Apps APIs. And I have some code examples in Perl, is what the Unix team here uses. And then I'm going to go over GAM, the Google Manager. And then I'm going to talk about how we might still use the Google Web Control panel, even with all the APIs and such. If you follow this link, rexroof.com/G+, you can download slides. I shared them on Google+. Washtenaw Community College, we're in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Our current enrollment is around 12,000 students. We at a banner school running on Oracle. We use Blackboard, and for the staff email, we use Microsoft Exchange. We Googled in 2008 for just our students. We came from a legacy PHP IMAP system hosted on SendMail Unix, and we did a role migration based on enrollment. And if our student came back, we moved them into Google Apps. And originally scripted a system in Perl, and we're creating about 1,000 to 2,000 students on Google Apps a day at that point. Right now, we make about 70, depending on enrollment and such. So right now we have 50,000 provisioned accounts, and we have 45 IT staff here at the school, and only one Google Apps admin, and that's me, and I only do it part-time, so it takes very little of our time. Here's some Perl code. Like I said, it's might be tough to read on your display, so check the slides. This is a function. I have a module that I've written in Perl that goes through and gives us all the tools we need for the API, and then I can script things in Perl using those functions. So this function is the function, and it just uses a regular LW user agent object from Perl. No, the API is just, it makes web requests, and you essentially, for most of them, pass a block of XML, and then you put the XML that comes back and make sure everything worked the way you expected. So here we pass in a email and a password, which is our admin account, to authenticate ourselves to Google Apps, and we pass that information in the HTTP header object. Here we make a request and make sure it was a success, otherwise we bounce. And then in the code, I parse the response and I look for the auth token, which is what we're going to use every time we make a subsequent call to APIs to authenticate ourselves. I also parse out the SID because for some reason that's used in the reporting API. I move on to the create user function, which is something we do all the time, and this is in the provisioning API. First thing my function does is make sure that I was passed in the right objects, the right ops. Then we run the auth login function that I just covered that grabs our token. And here you can see this big chunk of XML in the middle there, which I copied basically directly from the provisioning documentation, and I pass that to Google Apps over the API. And see that in the top there, I pass the auth token for authentication. Then send that request and make sure it's a success. If it's not, I just bomb out. Otherwise, if there's any of these errors I expect, once in a while I'll make a call and the object already, because I didn't make it already, so it returns that. I'd say probably once a day, even with 70 or 100 requests a day. Once a day I'll get a generic 500 error from Google Apps, and I handle that here. Every once in a great while I'll get an internal error, and I don't recognize as one of the ones that I know a lot. I will try to part out of the XML, or if not XML in that string, I will just bomb out entirely, which very rarely happens. So some notes I wanted to make about the APIs. If you were going to write something like this from scratch, I would probably use the OAuth authentication as opposed to the client login. It was so popular when I started coding my stuff, so I don't use it. I would also, I have to tell you, make sure you handle errors. Not very often, but once in a while you'll get some weirdness that you need to handle. And like the talk last week talked about, you're going to make you look for quota errors. As much as it pains me to admit it, as a guy, this Python tool is actually really handy. It's called Google Apps Manager. It's an open source project. Shorten is GAM. I've only gotten it to work in Python 2. I don't know if it supports Python 3. It authenticates with OAuth, which means the first time you run it, it passes to a web page that you have to approve authentication. I would make sure you're logged into the administrator account for your domain before you do this. I have some issues with the link quite working, especially with the single sign-on. GAM has support for pretty much all the APIs, the GAPS APIs, and line options for just not all of them. One downside to it, though, it is a little bit slow, and it doesn't have any native bulk actions. So if, like in the regular API, you can upload a big block of XML that will create a whole bunch of users, GAM would have to go through and do each of those individually, which can be a little bit slow. So the setup is really easy for GAM. These 4 lines at the top on most Unix boxes will do everything you need. You run it, the first time you run it, it will ask you for your domain. It'll ask you to authenticate over OAuth. And then, like I said, this will open up in your browser, or you can copy and paste the link that it prints out. The one left out here is there's a menu that asks you which realms or which APIs you want to authenticate, and I would just say all of them. You can pick and choose, but then you have to go back later and rerun it to give yourself authentication, give yourself access to them. So this process will write out a file called OAuth text, and it uses to authenticate itself every subsequent time it runs. One thing I did want to note about OAuth is that it stores, so this is per user. So say if I have an admin account and I wanted to log into my admin account, I would authenticate GAM, and it would be authenticated under my user as opposed to being authenticated on the domain, which means there's no single place that we can go in the management panel and see all of the see the places that we've authenticated OAuth with management tools or things that have administrative rights. We could actually step through all of the admin accounts and look for that, but yeah, just something to note. So here's examples of what you can do with OAuth. One of the things we've done is hacked it into our code to quickly set and unset profile sharing for the contacts. And pretty easy in GAM, like you can see here, GAM user profile shared or unshared, and it's checked. This is a quick hack we threw in, and I've kind of left it there so it's so easy. And then you can do things like show forwarding, and don't very often, but it's the kind of thing where if you're trying to track mail routing, it makes it really simple to dig into your domain and look for stuff. And the docs for this are really good if you go to their wiki site, which I'll link to at the end. Also, GAM info domain, this domain information. There's a lot of stuff here that I actually took out for our single sign-on and other things that it prints out. But the most interesting thing here for me was the support pin and the customer pin, because those things I needed to, if I ever wanted to find trouble tickets. So it's one of those things I had to dig through the management tools on the web to find. Now it's right there in GAM. So the web's control panel. Tools, there's honestly not a lot of reasons for me to go to the web panel. I used to use it for, we're obtaining that support pin. There used to be an IMAP migration tool that I use a lot. And all signing administrators, I've done that before in the API. I'm not even sure if I can. Another thing is checking. Every once in a while I create a user. This used to be more common, and it wouldn't really show up. APIs would not show it, but I wasn't able to remake it. But then if I went to the web tool and looked, it would be there. So I knew I had to file a trouble ticket to get it cleared out so I can make a new one. So here are the reasons that I still use it. I no longer have to look for the pin. Now there's a Windows migration tool that's really handy, and I link to it here. That's for moving people from Exchange over to Google Apps. Migrates their mail and their calendar and all that stuff. It's great. Other thing is, so I still have to do in the control panel, and I still occasionally will check for sanity errors. So links, that's it. But there's my Google Plus link. If you're going to write in the API, you're going to need access to the docs, and they work really well for Perl, even though there's no explicit Perl statements there. There's a link to GAM. You can download it there, and there's a wiki there. I also really suggest the Google Apps regional users groups. I'm a member of the North Central one, and the discussion that happens in the email list there is really invaluable. It's great. But thanks much.
Great. Thanks so much, Rex. Any quick questions for Rex? We're waiting for any questions to come in. I'm going to hand it over to Nick from NC State.
Hey there.
One general question for you, Rex, and anyone else can answer this too when they're presenting. So how often would you say now that you use the control panel versus all the APIs? Would you say you're more reliant on the APIs at this point than the control panel, or what would you say? I
really very rarely log into the control panel. With a single sign-on, I've discovered with single sign-on and having this is related, but having single sign-on and having multiple Google accounts, just having my own personal Google account and having a Google Apps account, logging into the control panel actually requires me to open a new browser or to open a Chrome incognito session. So I really notice when I log into the web panel, and it happens very rarely, maybe not even once a week. So.
All right. Okay, Nick, it's all yours.
Everybody, my slides okay?
Yep.
All right. I'll have this up at the end of my slides as well, but I've got these slides posted, or this Google presentation posted at that quick link down the bottom as well. So I'll jump straight in. So like Rex was saying, just a really brief history here. Our student migration finished in 2010 from a Cyrus IMAP service. That went pretty successfully, we all thought. Our employee migration was a two-part one. Some employees were on Cyrus IMAP, finished a little earlier, whereas everybody who was on the Novell group system finished just last year. We kind of ripped the bait off with them and scheduled everything to be moved on, or to be finally moved on November 30th, just last year. If anybody's interested, we post all of our kind of meeting documentation, minutes, decision points, all that kind of stuff on our website. So get with me separately if you'd like links specifically to those. I just didn't put those in the presentation. As of right now, I just logged into a quick check. We have about 123,000 provisioned accounts, which is all faculty, staff, and students in a Google Apps domain, and that's comprised as well of about 2,400 generic accounts, 130 resources, 428 Google groups. So that kind of gives you an idea what scale we're working with. So what are we using? We're using the provisioning API for users plus Google Groups. We're not using the Group Settings API yet. We're using the Calendar Resource API, we're using the Reporting API, and the Contacts API. So the way we are kind of implementing the APIs is we created a kind of an in-house tool that we called Web Registry, and essentially it's just a front end, kind of like the concept of the Google Apps Manager that Rex was talking about, where our users can log in using their NC State credentials and kind of request or manage the things that we allow them to manage. So basically, it manages the life cycle of Google generics, groups, and resources. So, the request process, the approval process, and the editing or deleting of that stuff once nobody needs it anymore. Web Registry helps us control the namespace so that everything that's requested is, of a standard naming convention. Provides an ordered inventory of who owns what, and I think the most important thing, and this is where it's very similar to CAM, is that it's the functionality gap between what Google provides via the Google Apps Control Panel for your domain and what our business process requires. So when we have specialized things that NC State needs to do, then we have to use the available APIs to kind of put that stuff into place. The Web Registry tool manages everything except for user accounts, mail aliases, and domain contacts. But we're kind of looking at the proposition of moving that kind of stuff into it as well. That's kind of a separate project. So to jump right into the API stuff, so our Google Groups, what our process is that somebody will come to Web Registry, they'll request their group, they'll get the options based on what naming convention they have to comply with, and then assuming their request gets approved, then we'll use API to provision the group, and it'll get provisioned with the email address of the group being group- and then whatever they filled in at ncsu.edu. Everybody's in the same domain here. We don't have any subdomains or suborgs or anything like that. So the reason why we do that is so that the namespace is kept kind of sanitized. There's no conflicts with user accounts and stuff like that. And then once the group is kind of approved, at the same time we set the Google Group admin account, it's just a generic Google account, as an owner of that group, and then use the API to set whoever requested the group as a member of it. And the manual step that we have to do right now is that we set that requester as a manager. So basically, somebody in domain admin logs in and promotes that member to be a manager. And then we basically turn over the group over to the manager and tell them to have fun, enjoy the group, use it, and ask us if they have questions. And obviously, we have documentation and stuff like that. Google Groups, why that method? So the reason why we do that process is that if you are an owner of a Google group, if you have that permission, then you're allowed to rename or delete that group using the web UI, but managers are not able to do that. So, we don't want group changing email addresses without us knowing. We don't want them to kind of disappear without us knowing, get created without us knowing for that matter. So that's why we kind of funnel everything through Web Registry. One of the important pieces is that every piece of mail for NC State runs through Postini. So you have to know about any new groups that created or email addresses that change, because otherwise Postini is going to reject it. And the biggest reason why we do that manual step is that the API doesn't currently allow you to set somebody as a manager. It allows you to set somebody as a member, and it allows you to set them as an owner, not a manager. So that's why we have to do that manual step. So jump straight into some code. Real quick, we build our web registry tool using Zen Framework, which is just PHP. So line 1 up the top right there is just the call that is essentially started off when the request is approved. So basically, it's just saying, take the choices that were approved by, an administrator that was submitted by the user and feed it into the create group function. So line 2 starts the create group function. So basically, it's just going to kind of step through the process, very similar to what Rex was talking about before. So there's a HTTP client, and then as part of that, the client gets the headers set for it, which is an XML. The headers are set for the authorization with the Google login piece. The URI, that self-group URI that's on line 6, that's essentially just the API endpoint. So it's going to be something like, I think it's like API or appsapi.google.com/feeds/group/2.0 or something. Basically, that's the API that you're going to talk to, and then just we append our domain onto the end of it, so it knows that we're trying to manipulate or create a group for our domain. And the important piece here is the line 7, set raw data, which is creating the group XML, which is actually going to be what's sent to Google to say, we want to create this group. So it's got the group ID that's going to be sent, the group name, description, the email permission, and then you'll see on line 8 that's where it's actually sent. So what happens when that's sent? So let me skip one slide forward. The create group XML is formatted fairly straightforward. You can kind of read it almost plain English if you've seen XML before. Essentially, we're just feeding the group ID, group name, description, email permission to it, and it's just formatted as you can see here. So group name, you pass whatever your group name is in there. Description, you pass the description in there. And that just kind of formats it. Just like any application, we're kind of abstracting pieces out of it so that if, say, the Google Groups API, Google Provision API changes, we don't have to change our entire app. We just have to come in here and kind of change the format of the XML that's getting generated, or we have to change one other piece rather than having to kind of force everything. And I guess that's a side note too. The Google APIs do change frequently, sometimes without notice, in small or large ways. So the easier you make your code to maintain, the easier your life is going to be. So just to jump back, after that XML is posted out to Google, then the result you get back, like Rex was saying, you've got to handle your errors. In this case, all we're doing is saying that it comes back, and if it's a 201, then that means everything's fine, the group was created. If it doesn't back as a 201, then there's an error, and essentially for this purpose, we're just spitting it out at that point and saying something went wrong, play the error to the admin, and then we'll kind of deal with it. And that might be just to resubmit it again and see if that works. And then after that, if everything's fine, we return the Atom feed, the XML feed that we get back from Google to an array, which is easier for us to handle. And then we can kind of use that for display or for inputting into our database. The code, the developer guide's linked at the bottom there. So the second part of the process is obviously you've got to add a member. So after a group is created and everything's fine, that 201 status comes back. We actually make the script sleep for 3 seconds because what we found is that for some reason it intermittently will fail. So if we make the script wait for 3 seconds after a group is created, then 100 out of 100, it seems like we're able to add members immediately or after that 3 seconds. If we try and do it immediately, then sometimes it'll fail and sometimes it won't. I'm guessing that's just a scale thing and a syncing issue with Google's data centers or something like that. So the add member process is extremely similar. Basically, it's on line 2, you'll see we just add a member to a group. So in this case, we're specifying the email address, of the user who's going to be added, and then we'll get through the exact same thing. So it's an HTTP client. We set the headers. We tell it where to go. We tell it to post. If it comes back 201, then everything's fine. And if it doesn't, then it's a manual error that we'll deal with. And obviously, the reason it's written like this is so that we can kind of abstract that out, so that every request doesn't have to have a specific class to create it. So the thing that I will mention, we had a bug recently that as recently as the last, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. The API doesn't enforce the rule of requiring at least one owner. So the result ends up being that managers cannot unsubscribe anybody unless there's an owner. So this is why in that first slide I said that we provision the Google Group admin account into each group, because that means that the group admin account is set as an owner. The actual person who's in charge of the group is set as a manager, so that means that they still can't rename the group or delete it or anything like that, but they are able to unsubscribe people from it because there's at least one manager. So we reported this to Google, and the support staff there said, yep, that's a bug. The API should enforce that rule, but it doesn't. So sooner or later, it's going to be fixed, but they couldn't give me a timeline on that. So that's just one small thing to be aware of. The reporting API uses it for getting lists, cross-checking so we can verify who's been provisioned, who should be deprovisioned, suspended, all that good stuff. And we also pull last login time to so that we can determine account use. Right now we're not using it, but we plan on using it later to deprovision accounts if somebody doesn't log in for a predetermined amount of time. We offer lifetime Google accounts, if you can call them that. As long as you've graduated from NC State, then you get to keep your account after graduation, and sooner or later we'll start looking at implementing that policy where if you don't use your account for X number of months or years or whatever, then we will decommission it. That's that. And that's all I have. So that's the link to the slides at the bottom there, and actually I think I have the time wrong. But if anybody has any questions, shoot me an email, or Jordan has my contact, or give me whatever. We're always happy to help.
Thanks. Any questions for Nick right now? I actually had one. We mentioned a little bit about groups earlier. What kind of ways do you all use groups? Do you use them for classes, organizations, committees, things like that? And then also, what do you all do when owners leave?
Okay, so part one of that is we are using groups as a kind of just an individual requests it, and they use it for whatever reason they want. As long as they don't put in a request for something that has, a four-word in their name, something that we don't want to be associated with at CSU.edu, then they get it and they can use it for whatever they want. You find people are using it for as a replacement for a mailing list service, or they're using it as a quick way to share documents or invite large groups of people to a calendar event. Those are usually the biggest kind of use cases. We're looking at, and I can't remember the school that we were going to talk to about it, but recently we were talking to people who's essentially provisioning Google Groups for every class that they have. We know that we want to do that. We haven't got to it yet. We know kind of the complexity that's going to take, but we know a couple of other schools are already doing it, so we can kind of piggyback off of what they've done. And the second part, what do we do when somebody leaves? So that's one of the big reasons why we implement Web Registry, is because Web Registry is kind of the inventory. It's the one version of the truth about all of our generics, groups, resources, everything. We know we can run queries on the Web Registry database to essentially say, you tell me which users who own things don't exist in our in LDAP or wherever we're authorizing, wherever people are logging in from PeopleSoft or whatever. And what we're going to do is essentially somebody disappears, and there's like orphaned Google group out there or a generic account or something, then that'll get kind of owned by one of the members of our team, or it'll be owned by the help desk, and we'll contact the department, which is one of the things they have to fill in when they request an account, which department they work for. We'll contact the department and ask them to either supply who the replacement owner should be, or we'll decommission that account because that person's left and nobody claimed it.
Another question about groups. Someone wanted to know if you've run into any issues with people adding too many external members of groups and hitting limits.
Well, that's one thing I actually posted to the North American list. I think it was this week or last week or something. We've not turned on external members yet. We don't allow any of our groups to have external members, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One behavior that we found, but we haven't been able to replicate or on a regular basis, is that somebody got the member list to expand when they sent an email to it, even though they weren't permitted to see the member list. So we're trying to figure out how that happened. And also, we have some NC State gets hit a lot, or gets attempted to be hit a lot from phishers and spammers and things like that. And what we are conscious of is that if an external address gets added to a Google group, whether intentionally or unintentionally, if that account is compromised for spam or anything like that, then essentially the spammers or the phishers have kind of a way in. So what we're trying to do is come up with a way to audit the Google group membership lists and kind of make sure that none of the accounts that are external are known phishing accounts, or at least so that we know that they're there so we can shut them off if we find something.
And then just one more question. Someone asked about when you create generic accounts. How do you create them, and do you create them with a user that has delegated access?
Generic accounts for us are almost identical to a user account in terms of Google. When you log into the Google control panel, you can't tell the difference between a generic account and a Google account. We don't delegate access to it at all. We basically create the account, and that account can log into Google, but it cannot log into anything else. It can't log into the portal. It can't log into the financial systems or anything else. So what happens is Web Registry manages the password process, the password change process for those generic accounts, so that when the account is approved and it's been provisioned, Web Registry will notify the owner or the requester to come to Web Registry. They'll see what the default password is, which is like a random string of characters, and then they can change it to whatever they want. At the point when they change it, the password disappears, so that we even store it ourselves. Basically, it's synced out to Google, and that's it. So yeah, for the most part, generic accounts are the responsibility. So we provision them of the person who requested it, and then they can go in and set up delegate access, or they can log into it themselves and do whatever they want.
Cool. Thanks again, Nick. And now we're going to switch it over to Bill from University of Alaska. Bill should have presenter privileges any second now.
I'm Jordan. Thank you. Hello, everyone. We'll see the slideshow. Our slideshow here is a little less technical, a little more functional. And sitting with me is Phil Jacobs, who's the lead engineer on a lot of our API development that's gone to Google Apps and can handle some of the more technical questions, should there be any. A brief view of the University of Alaska. We're another state university. We have 3 separately accredited institutions distributed geographically across a pretty large area, and each of those have multiple affiliated campuses totaling 16 for the whole institution. This would normally show you a map of all of the campuses, and then I would show you that overlaid on top of the contiguous 48 states. So you let campuses go from west Arizona to northern Minnesota to northern Texas over to southern Georgia. So keep in mind those logistics statistics when you see some of our decisions and policy statements. We Google Apps and have been using them. Our pilot was in 2008. We went to production in 2009. We had the odometer just rolled over to 88,000 accounts this week. And, we have faculty, students, and staff from a couple accredited academic units as we think of them. There's one institution holding out faculty and staff and another holding out everyone. They'll allow anyone who can authenticate to our unified Active Directory to have an account, and so assimilated. How do we use APIs at the University of Alaska? We don't use them nearly as much as we might like. And let's get the slide to advance here. These are the areas we use them in. Very similar to our colleagues Rex and Nick and their presentations. We're for all these various areas, and we include gadgets. We think of the labs as an API gadget that lets us do some things. We do the usual with accounts. We create them, we delete them, and do a few things in between. Also, use some APIs to glean and maintain a local, as Nick mentioned, a web registry, a database of information, so we can write and automate some other processes. One of those, for instance, is reminding newbies to the institution, if they haven't already claimed their Google Apps account, they're triggered to go do so when they log into specific systems. The login to the system continues, but also a reminder that comes up if they haven't yet claimed their account, and allows them to go claim it, or no thanks, remind me later, and that just happens once per calendar date, so we're not spamming people with reminders. Calendars, the same kind of thing. We do a lot of calendars. We have a course finder application that has a calendar for every course in the system. Each course has scheduling and venue information, and those are what we call the planning calendars. Those calendars are used by anybody worldwide with Course Finder to either subscribe to and overlay on their own Google calendars, or we're in the process of writing a mashup utility so they can do a live mashup just in the web view independent of their Google accounts. That's very well received. We also create a club of all the course calendars, and they're owned by the individual instructors of record for each course. And those are pre-populated too from our ERP, which is Banner, with the data for scheduling and venue, and then the instructors can add their own events and those done a couple months ahead of time before a new term begins. Term approaches, we all provision a Google group for each course that has all the enrolled students, and the faculty are the owners. The instructors of record for each course are the owners, and that group added to its corresponding calendar, so the students, when they come to school, automatically see all of their courses overlaid in their Google Apps account, and that's been fairly well received as well. Some of the things we do, the usual, we use some of the authentication APIs for access control. We do SO using our unified Active Directory domain for the authentication. We chose early on through the security group decided they'd rather not sync our local passwords to the Google password. Pardon me. So we allow users to self-set their Google site password, but we don't prevent them from making them the same if they so choose. Earlier, we think of Google Labs as APIs. As one example, we wrote a little. In fact, Phil worked on that most recently and finished up and maintains this widget allows people to add gadget using the lab any gadget by URL. Basically, it embeds a little directory lookup, so you can use our centralized directory to find a person and add to your Google contacts from there if you like, or just call them or email them or what have you. It's just a real quick lookup. We don't have the directory activated. That's just one of our future API integrations, so we can exclude students from the shared directory and bypass any FERPA concerns, not have to maintain syncing with whether a student has chosen to set their FERPA privacy flag or not, because that can happen spontaneously multiple times in a day. So we'll avoid that. And then lead up to what we focus on for today's discussion, audits. That's probably the least used area by us. Not whiz-bang there, I'm afraid. There's two audit APIs we're aware of that Google provides. The admin audit API, which Phil created OAuth 2 access to for domain admins. We have four administrators basically for our domain, and we all rotate space here in the same building. We have little use for monitoring the log files for domain administrator actions. And the second bullet there, the admin control panel audit log that Google provides now in the reports tab in the control panel more than suffices for our needs, but we keep the OAuth access to all logs if we ever need that. And I believe Phil's mentioned we've had to use that a time or two when working with Google Tech Support on some troubleshooting. For how that API we use the most is the email audit API, and I'd say we actually don't use that very much. Strictly for legal and security situations. Because we don't need to touch that more than maybe 3 or 4 times a year on average, we use GAM. X founded on in his presentation earlier. That was very adequate for our needs to go in for the typical kind of request, which might be something like legal to our security group. Security group will I'll show you a workflow here, kind of an overview of how this all goes together. Security make a request from us, and they'll provide a public encryption key with the request, and we'll assign that to one of the Google Apps administrators who will go in and typical request is, we're anticipating a search warrant. Please go in and preliminarily archive a mail as of this request date on this account or these accounts. As you know, we don't have Postini, so we don't have any other archive mechanism in place, and that's by choice at present. So in and Google sets that up into an encrypted file that will either leave on the Google side for up to the 3 weeks that Google allows, because this is a preemptive request. If no search warrants received or this whatever issue was dies down, we just let it evaporate at Google and never download it. However, they want to maintain a copy of it for the records, we'll download it and then pass it on. And this little bit of information is important because what it really boils down to is, in a situation like that, most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with maintaining a chain of custody. And our goal is that we can't decrypt and read the file, nor can anybody except for the people holding the private keys, and that's security group in this case. It's easy to handle and maintain a chain of custody, especially if you're logs of when they came and got the file. And our goal is to ourselves the expense of having to have our T-shirts laundered and pressed, so we have to go sit in on a stand for an afternoon. That hasn't happened yet, so we're very pleased with how this all works.
All right, just someone else mute, please. I don't know if that's Rex or Nick. dialed into the conference, can you please mute? I'll do. Let me start up the phone conference. Oh, stop. No, it didn't. Okay. Let me start up the phone conference again. Please hang tight, people. Sorry about that. Bill, I don't know if you're still with us, but I'm going to have to. Yes.
Problem for us, as much as everybody else does. So we adjust the workflow, and essentially, this is a high level of how we use the two APIs provided by Google, and we come to questions about the APIs or any of the other things we may have mentioned in the beginning.
So we had a couple of questions come in. Back when you were talking about the Audit API slide earlier, Bill, someone wanted to know more about how you all use groups at University of Alaska. So, what page are you referring to when you said we use Google Group and Google Apps? Are you referring to a site or any docs, anything like that?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but let me address how do we use Google Groups at the university. Is that the crux of the question?
No, and then they can provide more context if we misunderstood that. Oh, okay, they just did. How do students see the group that they are in?
The students find the group in a couple ways. One, we've integrated Google Apps with our learning management system, which is also within our departmental purview, and that's Blackboard Learn, and we're using Google for that integration. And so they get automatically for all courses that are in Blackboard. And I should mention as an aside, all of our courses are in Blackboard Learn instance, but not all instructors may choose to activate their course. And so students learn about it that way, but about 80% do. Learn about it is it shows up, since they're added as a member of the group for each course they've enrolled in, I'm speaking of students now, they will see them listed when they look at groups. They'll also realize that when they look at the calendars that have been automatically added to their own Google Calendar, they'll have a list of attendees in that specific course since it's been shared out via the group. And as an aside, the group membership is managed automatically by Google in the Blackboard Learn. And so all of the instructors using Blackboard Learn automatically have that list managed through the Google sync capability. I'll expound on that further if anybody's interested. Other groups that we created, we do not keep synchronized as kind of an incentive to get those instructors to use Blackboard Learn. So that's we've used groups. That's the universal push out for a course. The other thing we have, and as Nick and I believe Rex both mentioned, we isolate the request process from the provisioning process. In case the provisioning process breaks, we can always go in and do things manually. So anybody can request a Google group and a form that isolates the requirements and also addressing the issue of too many external members. We ask how many members they anticipate because and we do allow external members to our groups as an option of the group owner. And we go ahead and for groups, send it to the owner of the vesting owner, and the group is inactive until they add members and do things themselves. We want them to learn how to do it. And so we send your group's been created email with lots of links and how to get started. And a few of them call for help, but most do not. They just get running with it. So those are two main use cases for groups.
Great, Bill. A couple other questions about groups coming in. How often do you update group membership for the class-based groups during the semester?
I mentioned that's done automatically with the Google build block in or Blackboard Learn, and so every time any member of a class in Blackboard Learn clicks on a link published from the instructor or instructor's Google Apps account, say they share a document or a site or whatever, every time any of those links are by anybody within Blackboard Learn, it automatically updates the group membership of everybody affiliated with that class at that of the click. Do not do any syncing of membership with groups, even though we created them right before the term started, so they're almost current. There's the add drop period where membership may change. We do not sync those as an enticement for those instructors, if they want that ability, go in and use Blackboard Learn.
And then another question regarding accounts. You show suspend, deprecate, and delete. What is the deprecate function?
Also, our version of moving slowly towards delete. So, for instance, we might it's a process more than a function. The process is we suspend accounts on graduates that haven't returned to the university, say, for a year, and we'll wait 6 more months to see if anybody squawks, hey, I need my account, and if anything, we'll delete them. Or they may be removed from our local authentication system, the Unified Active Directory, and they can't log through that method. So then we'll go in and scramble their Google site password, so IMAP and POP is also dysfunctional, and let those sit in that state for a period of time. And if we don't hear back from those account holders, say, after 3 to 6 months, we'll delete those accounts too. But deprecate, it's more of an internal process.
Okay. And questions for all 3 of our presenters, please submit them in the Q&A window. Another question, this is towards everyone. All leveraging the APIs to manage organizational units in the control panel at all?
This is Rex from WCC. We haven't found a use for the organizational units, only because we just have students on Google Apps right now. Our faculty and staff are on there, and they use the tools, but we don't give them any different rights or access.
University of Alaska, ditto for us. We have no use cases yet for OUs.
That's the same thing at NC State?
But a process of classifying people into different employee classes and things like that. But the simple fact is that we would still have to would have to be a reason to split people to orgs based on what service we were going to provide to them. Right now, we don't see a reason why we would give employees any different apps or permissions or anything than students. So basically, you get an account and you're all in the same OU, same org or whatever, and everybody gets the same thing.
Thanks. Another question about handling expired accounts. How do you handle them? Using will only suspend disabled users, not expired users.
I'll jump in there from NC State. I will give the caveat that I am not the person in charge of that process by any means, but I believe that our process is that the provisioning process, somebody graduates or somebody leaves the university, employee or student or whatever, and they're not one of those lifetime account people. Essentially, our process is that I think we do a rename of the account in Google first, and then that way we can remove the account from the rest of the authentication system on campus, so they can't log into anywhere else, obviously. But then because of the 30-day window of you not being able to restore deleted accounts in Google, because we have renamed something the account before we removed it, if that person comes back or if somebody else comes back and needs that account to be kind of brought back to life, we can bring it back to life with the exact same username rather than having to kind of append a number 1 or 2 or whatever to the end of it.
That's pretty exactly what we do at Washtenaw. We disable the account and we wait a few weeks, and then it's automated at this point, but we disable the account and then we eventually delete it, and we name it before we delete it, so that way we again can create it if the student reapplies at the school the next day or something like that. Yeah.
So we have time for just one more question. Last call for any questions. Someone asked about integrations either with LMS, ERP, or any other system. So we talked a little bit about the Google Blackboard Google Apps integration. Are you all integrating with any other solutions?
I use ICT Banner, and all of our integrations have been done in-house. Essentially, I have Perl code that does SQL statements that determines eligibility, or someone in another department has written PLSQL that does that, and then I run regular queries and then create OpenLDAP and also Google Apps accounts based on that eligibility.
Yeah, at NC State, we run Moodle here, but it's managed out of a different kind of a different group on campus. So whereas we know that we will absolutely want to work with them to integrate Moodle or provide some kind of functionality connection between Moodle and Google Apps, we haven't that hasn't risen to the top of the priority list just yet. But we know that's something we absolutely want to do.
University of Alaska, we're similar to what Rex described. We query and pull data from the BARP and use it for provisioning and many other functions.
Great. Well, I think that's all we have for questions now. I'd like to say a big thank you to Bill, Nick, and Rex for taking the time to share how they're all using APIs at their respective schools. So thanks, guys. We really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone else for tuning in, and we hope that this was helpful and informative. This webinar is being recorded, so when the recording is available on YouTube, I'll send it out in our follow-up email. And then coming in April, we're going to have a few more Fireside Chats talking a little bit more about the calendar APIs, the DOS-List APIs, spreadsheet APIs, and then also app scripts. So that's how you can leverage tools to build some custom gadgets, kind of like what Bill was talking about, some other nice automated triggered workflows and processes. So stay tuned for even more discussions. Thanks again, everyone, and thanks again to our presenters, and have a great day.